Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. I usually scroll through Reddit, shaking my head at the crazy family drama people go through, thinking, wow, that sucks, but never expecting my own family to give me a story worth sharing. Yet here I am, feeling like an afterthought in my own family, and honestly, I need to vent. So here's the deal. My name is Ethan, I'm 30, single, no kids, and apparently the designated family doormat. I've always been the responsible one, the guy who picks up the slack, helps when needed, and never complains. But this time they pushed me too far. The whole mess started with my Aunt Carol's retirement. She's been a nurse for 35 years and is basically the glue that holds our family together, organizing holidays, remembering birthdays, and always checking in on everyone. Naturally, her retirement was a big deal, and I was excited to celebrate with her, until I found out I wasn't actually invited to the celebration. It happened during a casual dinner at my parents' house. My mom was in the kitchen, my dad half watching football, and my sister, Jenna, was glued to her phone as usual. The conversation was normal, nothing out of the ordinary, until I casually asked, "Hey, do you guys have any ideas for Aunt Carol's retirement gift?" Jenna didn't even look up. "Oh, we're giving her a group gift on the cruise." I blinked. "What cruise?" That was the moment my entire world tilted. She finally looked at me, her brows furrowed. "The cruise. You know, the one we've been planning for months? The whole family's going. Don't tell me you forgot." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. "You're joking, right?" Silence. I turned to my mom, who suddenly found stirring the pot of pasta very interesting. "Mom?" She hesitated, then finally sighed. "Well, honey, we thought you'd be more helpful staying back." "Staying back?" I repeated. "For what?" Jenna, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, said, "The kids. You're so great with them, and it just made sense for you to watch them while we're gone." Let me break this down. Between my sister and my cousins, there are 4 kids under 5, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and twins who are barely 2. And somehow, without even asking me, they had all decided I'd be totally fine staying behind to babysit for an entire week, for free. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh and say, "Just kidding." No one did. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You planned a whole family cruise, didn't invite me, and just assumed I'd be fine with staying back to babysit?" Jenna shrugged. "Well, yeah. You don't have kids or anything tying you down, and you're always reliable." There it was. That word. Reliable. Not family, not important, just reliable. My mom, trying to smooth things over, said, "We didn't mean to leave you out, sweetheart. We just thought you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one." Responsible. Another slap to the face. I sat there, the realization sinking in. This wasn't just an oversight. This was deliberate. They had been planning this for months. They had a private group chat about it, one I wasn't part of, and no one, not my mom, not my dad, not my sister, thought to mention it. I felt a lump in my throat, but I pushed it down. "Wow," I said, standing up. "Just wow." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like you'd even enjoy a cruise. You hate crowds." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, so now you get to decide what I would and wouldn't enjoy." Mom sighed. "We'll bring you back a souvenir, okay?" A souvenir? Like that was supposed to make up for being treated like an unpaid nanny. My phone buzzed as I left the house, still too stunned to fully process what had happened. A text from my cousin Maddie. "Hey, just heard you found out about the trip. Sorry you're upset, but can you still watch the twins? We really need this vacation." I turned off my phone. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just about the trip. It was what it said about my place in this family. I wasn't someone they valued enough to include. I was just a convenient option, a backup plan, the person they could count on when it benefited them. Not this time. I wasn't staying back, and I sure as hell wasn't babysitting. Let's see how they handle this one. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the dinner conversation over and over in my head, every little detail making me angrier. The worst part, it wasn't even about the trip anymore. It was about what it meant. They didn't even think to include me. I wasn't a real part of the family, just a convenient, reliable, responsibility-free babysitter. But they were about to learn just how unreliable I could be. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. The group chat, the one I wasn't in, must have finally realized I knew, because suddenly, everyone had something to say. "Mom, sweetheart, I hope you're not too upset. We just thought you'd be more comfortable staying back. Jenna, can you at least confirm you're watching the kids? We need to know ASAP. Maddie, hey, I get why you're mad, but this isn't a huge deal. It's just 1 week. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Right, I was the one making things difficult, not the people who excluded me from a family trip and assumed I'd drop everything to watch their kids for free. I didn't respond. Instead, I went about my morning like nothing had happened. I made coffee, went for a jog, and then I sat down at my laptop and booked a trip. Not just any trip, an amazing trip. A week-long stay at a mountain lodge with hiking trails, hot springs, and 0 screaming kids. It was a little last minute, but hey, so was my babysitting gig. If my family could plan a whole trip without telling me, I could sure as hell plan my own getaway. By noon, I was packed, and by evening, I was gone. I didn't bother telling anyone. They didn't think to check in with me before making their plans, so why should I check in with them? About 3 hours into my drive, my phone started blowing up again. At first, it was just a few texts. Then, the calls started. I ignored them all. If they were so desperate to reach me, maybe they should have talked to me before assuming I'd drop my life for them. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station and checked my messages. Jenna, where are you? We're dropping off the kids soon. Mom, Ethan, please answer. We need to talk. Maddie, this is really selfish of you. We need this vacation. You don't understand how stressful parenting is. I nearly laughed. I didn't understand stress. They were the ones trying to dump 4 kids on me with 0 notice. I put my phone on silent and kept driving. By the time I reached the lodge, it was almost midnight. I checked in, grabbed my key, and stepped into the coziest little cabin I had ever seen. A fireplace, a huge comfy bed, a window overlooking the mountains, absolute perfection. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. No guilt, no obligations, no one expecting me to sacrifice my time for their convenience. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to even more missed calls. At this point, I was almost impressed by their persistence. I scrolled through my notifications. Jenna, you better not be serious. Where are you? Mom, your sister is in tears. She doesn't know what to do. Just call us, please. Dad, the first time he had texted me through this whole ordeal, son. I don't know what's going on, but you need to sort this out. And then there was the kicker one from Maddie that actually made my jaw drop. Maddie, we might have to call CPS. You abandoned the kids when they were supposed to be in your care. I laughed out loud at that one. They were really trying everything, huh? I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't said yes. Hell, they never even asked me. And now they were accusing me of child abandonment? I cracked my neck, stretched, and went to make myself a cup of coffee. A few hours later, after ignoring at least 10 more calls, I finally gave in and answered one. It was Mom. Ethan, where are you? She cried the second I picked up. Morning, Mom, I said, sipping my coffee. How's the cruise? She didn't appreciate the sarcasm. This isn't funny. Your sister and Maddie have been scrambling all morning trying to find someone to watch the kids. They're devastated. Oh no, I said flatly. That must be really inconvenient for them. She let out a frustrated breath. This is serious, Ethan. You left them in a really tough spot. No, Mom, I said, my voice sharpening. They left me out of a family vacation and assumed I'd be fine staying behind as an unpaid babysitter. That's not my problem to fix. She was quiet for a second, then tried a different tactic. You know, families help each other. That's what we do. Really? I said, because I don't remember anyone helping me when I was excluded from the trip. Another pause. Then she sighed. We just thought, that's the problem. I cut in. You thought for me. You didn't ask. You didn't even consider that I might want to go. You just assumed I'd be okay being left behind to babysit. That's not family. That's using someone. She let out a small, helpless noise. So, what do we do now? I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. Figure it out. Like I said, I'm not home. I made my own plans, just like you guys did. Silence. Then, finally, a quiet, defeated, I see. I hope you all have a great time, I said, and then I hung up. I spent the rest of the day hiking, soaking in the hot springs, and enjoying my peace and quiet. The messages slowed down, and by the evening, it seemed like they had finally gotten the hint. I knew there would be fallout when I got back. Mom would probably try another guilt trip. Jenna and Maddie would be furious. Dad would pretend to be neutral. but still take their side. But you know what? For the first time in years, I didn't care. They had treated me like an afterthought. Now they were getting a taste of what it felt like to be left out. And honestly, it felt damn good. The first 2 days at the lodge were pure bliss. No screaming kids, no guilt-tripping texts thanks to Do Not Disturb mode, and no one expecting me to drop everything for their convenience. I hiked scenic trails, soaked in the hot springs, and actually sat in silence, something I didn't realize I desperately needed. But by the 3rd day, I was curious. Had my family finally accepted reality, or were they still spiraling? Against my better judgment, I checked my phone. Big mistake. The group chat, yes, the one I wasn't originally in, had been on fire. Jenna, you have no idea how much stress you've caused. Maddie had to cancel her part of the trip. You could have just helped for 1 week. Mom, I don't understand why you're punishing us like this. Families help each other. Maddie, do you even care that you ruined Aunt Carol's celebration? She's heartbroken that there's all this drama now. Dad, yes, even Dad, who normally stayed out of things. You should have communicated better. This whole mess could have been avoided. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. For months, they had an entire vacation planned without telling me. But I was the one who failed to communicate. And then came the kicker. A voicemail from Mom. I hesitated before pressing play. Ethan, honey, I just don't understand. You've never been like this before. You've always been so good to the family. What happened? Your sister is devastated. Maddie is furious. Your dad and I just want to fix this. But you're being so stubborn. This isn't you. Call me back. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. This isn't you. There it was. That classic manipulative guilt trip, wrapped in a motherly plea. Because in their eyes, I was the problem. I had suddenly changed. Not them. Not their entitled assumptions. I locked my phone and set it aside. I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just mad that I didn't roll over and accept it like I always had. And if they were expecting me to come crawling back with an apology, yeah, not happening. By the time I checked my messages again the next day, the tone had shifted. Jenna, fine, whatever. We got a sitter. You can stop ignoring us now. Maddie, yeah, thanks for nothing. I had to miss the trip, and it's all on you. Mom, I just don't know what's happened to this family. I stared at the last message. That was rich, coming from the person who let me get excluded from a family vacation and then tried to dump their responsibilities on me. But I wasn't going to engage, not anymore. Instead, I enjoyed the rest of my trip in peace. For the first time in years, I put myself first. I read a book by the fire, went on another hike, and even treated myself to an overpriced spa session because why not? And let me tell you, it felt damn good. By the time I got home, I was fully prepared for the drama waiting for me. What I wasn't expecting was how quickly it hit. Barely 10 minutes after walking through my front door, my phone rang. Mom, I considered ignoring it, but I was tired of running from this conversation. I answered. Yeah? You're back, she said, relief flooding her voice. We need to talk. I sighed. Let me guess. This is about how I ruined everything? There was a pause. Sweetheart, you hurt a lot of people. Your sister was scrambling. Maddie missed the cruise. And the whole trip was full of tension because of this mess. I let out a humorless chuckle. Because of me? Well, yes, she admitted, as if she couldn't understand why that was offensive. You could have just helped. I felt my jaw tighten. Mom, let me ask you something. If I hadn't found out about the trip by accident, when exactly were you planning to tell me? Another pause. Then she said quietly, we didn't think it would be an issue. I nearly dropped the phone. You didn't think it would be an issue? I repeated, my voice sharp, not inviting me to a family trip and expecting me to babysit instead. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she said, her tone shifting to frustration. It was a simple mistake. No, Mom, I snapped. A mistake is forgetting to send an invitation. This was deliberate. You didn't forget me. You just didn't think I mattered. That's not true, she said quickly. Really? Then tell me why not one person thought to include me. Why did no one ask if I was okay staying back? Why did everyone just assume I'd drop everything for them? She was silent. I continued. You want to know why I didn't babysit? Because I'm not the family's backup plan. I'm not your convenience. And if you think treating me like an afterthought is okay, then maybe this family dynamic needs to change. Now she was the one exhaling sharply. Ethan, families help each other. Yeah, I said coldly. But helping means asking, not assuming. Another silence. Then, in a small voice, she muttered, I don't want things to be like this. For the first time, I heard actual sadness in her voice. I sighed, my anger deflating slightly. Mom, I love you, but I'm not going to let this happen again. If you guys want me to be part of this family, you need to treat me like family, not like an unpaid babysitter. She didn't respond right away. But when she finally spoke, she simply said, I understand. And, for once, I actually believed her. Jenna and Maddie still weren't speaking to me. Dad was neutral as always, but something had shifted with Mom. A week later, she sent me a text. Mom, I just want you to know that I hear you. I'm sorry. I really am. That was the first time she had ever apologized for anything like this. Did it fix everything? No. But it was a start. And this time, I was finally standing my ground. The week after my trip was eerily quiet. Jenna and Maddie were still radio silent, which, honestly, was a blessing. My dad was staying out of it, like always. And my mom? Well, her apology was still sitting in my messages, unread since the day she sent it. I wasn't ready to respond. Not yet. For years, I had been the one to smooth things over, to apologize even when I wasn't in the wrong, just to keep the peace. But this time, I wasn't budging. If my family wanted to fix things, it had to start with them, not me rolling over and pretending everything was fine. And for once, that felt good. But I should have known the peace wouldn't last forever. A few days later, I was in the middle of dinner when my phone rang. Jenna, the first, stared at the screen, debating whether I should answer. But something told me this conversation needed to happen sooner or later. I sighed and picked up. Yeah? Well, finally, she snapped. You've been ignoring us for days. I took a bite of my food, completely unbothered. Yup. She let out a frustrated breath. Ethan, this whole thing is so stupid. You could have just watched the kids. You could have helped. But instead, you had to be petty and make everything about you. I blinked. You think I made everything about me? Yes, she huffed. You knew we were counting on you, and you just ran off without saying anything. I couldn't stop myself. I laughed. Jenna, I was never asked. No one ever asked me if I was available. You all just decided for me. Because you always help, she shot back. You always step up, so why would we think this time was any different? That hit differently. I leaned back in my chair, her words sinking in. She wasn't even denying it. They had assumed I would say yes because I always did. Because I never told them no. I took a deep breath. Jenna, that's exactly the problem. She scoffed. What is? The fact that you all assumed. The fact that I've always helped. So, you never once thought to check if I wanted to help. Do you even hear yourself? She went quiet. I continued. You excluded me from a family trip. Didn't tell me. Didn't think it was important for me to be included. But the second you realized you needed something from me, suddenly, I mattered? She groaned. Ethan, it wasn't like that. Yes, it was. I cut in. And that's why I left. That's why I didn't babysit. Because I refused to be the person who only matters when you need something from me. More silence. And then finally, in a small voice, she muttered, You really hurt Maddie, you know. I let out a humorless chuckle. Oh, you mean Maddie, who tried to accuse me of child abandonment over kids that were never my responsibility. Yeah, not feeling too bad about that one. Jenna sighed, but she didn't argue. So, what now? I exhaled, staring at the ceiling. I don't know, but things aren't going back to how they were, she hesitated. So, you're really just done? I'm done being treated like a convenience. I corrected. If you want me in your life, you need to respect me. And that means treating me like family, not backup childcare. She didn't have a response to that. The next few days were weird. Jenna hadn't texted again. Maddie was still MIA. My dad, true to form, was acting like nothing had happened. But my mom? She showed up at my door. I opened it to find her standing there. Holding a Tupperware container like that would somehow smooth everything over. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly. I made lasagna. I sighed. Mom, I know, she said quickly. Food doesn't fix things, but I just wanted to talk. I let her in. She set the container on the counter and turned to face me, wringing her hands. I don't want things to be like this. I crossed my arms. Neither do I. But things have to change, Mom. She nodded. I know. And I am really sorry. For everything. I studied her, waiting for the but it never came. She sighed. I hate how we made you feel. I hate that we didn't even think about what this would look like from your perspective. And I hate that it took something this big for me to see it. That caught me off guard. For the first time in this whole mess, it actually felt real. I leaned against the counter, exhaling. I don't know how to move forward from this. I know, she said quietly, and I don't expect you to forgive us overnight. But I do want to fix this. I don't want you to feel like you're just there for convenience. I swallowed hard. Then things need to change, she nodded, and they will. That night, after Mom left, I sat in my quiet apartment, staring at the lasagna sitting on my counter. Maybe things could change. Maybe this was the wake-up call they needed. Or maybe they'd go right back to their old ways, expecting me to cave. Either way, one thing was certain: I wasn't going back to how things used to be. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line, and no matter what happened next, I wasn't crossing it. The days after Mom's visit were strange. I wasn't used to this kind of quiet. No passive-aggressive texts from Jenna, no guilt-tripping voicemails from Maddie, and no half-hearted attempts from Dad to smooth things over. It was like my family had hit pause, unsure of what to do now that I wasn't playing my usual role. And for once, I wasn't in a hurry to fix it. I had spent too long being the fixer, the reliable one, the person who always stepped up, no matter how unfairly I was treated. But this time I was doing something different. I was letting them sit with the consequences of their own actions. And honestly, it felt damn good. It took exactly 4 days before Jenna cracked. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, knocking like she was about to break the door down. I considered ignoring it, but I knew she wouldn't leave until I opened up. With a sigh, I swung the door open. Jenna stood there, arms crossed, looking pissed. "Can I come in?" she asked, though it sounded more like a demand. I shrugged. "Depends. You here to apologize or to tell me how selfish I am again?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Ethan, enough with that. Can we just talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She stormed past me and plopped onto my couch, exhaling sharply. I took my time, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge before sitting across from her. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, she let out a frustrated groan. "I don't get it. I really don't." I raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" "This new version of you," she said, gesturing vaguely. "The one who doesn't just go along with things. The one who doesn't put family first." I almost laughed. "Jenna, I've always put family first. The problem is, family never put me first." She flinched but didn't argue. I leaned forward. "You know what I don't get? How you still don't see what was wrong about all this. You and Maddie planned a vacation for months. Months, Jenna, and never once thought to include me. But the second you needed a babysitter, suddenly I mattered." She shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it?" I asked. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know, okay? We just assumed you'd be fine with it. You always help. You never say no." There it was again. That same damn logic. I shook my head. "That's exactly the problem, Jenna. You never ask. You just assume. And then when I finally say no, you act like I'm some different person." "I haven't changed. I just stopped letting you walk all over me." She looked away, chewing on her lip. I sighed. "Did you even get a sitter?" "Yeah," she muttered. "But it was expensive." I raised an eyebrow. "You know what's also expensive? A cruise. Funny how there was money for that, but not for childcare." Her jaw tightened. "It's not the same thing." I tilted my head. "Why? Because one benefits you and the other doesn't?" She had nothing to say to that. That night, I got another text from Mom. "Mom, I don't want to push, but I'd like to have dinner together. Just us. No pressure." I debated it. The last thing I wanted was another conversation full of guilt and excuses, but at the same time, I could tell she was trying. And if there was anyone in my family I still wanted to salvage a relationship with, it was her. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small diner, one of those cozy spots with old-fashioned booths and warm lighting. Mom was already there when I arrived, nursing a cup of tea. She smiled when she saw me, but there was hesitation in her eyes. I sat down. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. It was like we were both trying to figure out how to start. Finally, Mom sighed. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. She toyed with her spoon, staring into her tea. I don't like how we made you feel. I don't like that you felt like you didn't matter to us. She exhaled. And I hate that I didn't see it sooner. I studied her, trying to gauge if this was another attempt at smoothing things over, or if she really meant it. She looked up at me. You were right about all of it. We took you for granted. We didn't think about how it looked from your side. And that's not okay. I swallowed, feeling something tight in my chest. I had wanted an apology, but now that I was getting one, I didn't know what to do with it. Mom reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. I don't want to lose you, Ethan. I let out a slow breath. You won't. She nodded. Then tell me what you need. For the first time, she was asking, not assuming. I met her gaze. I need boundaries, Mom. She nodded slowly. Okay, no more assumptions. I continued. If you need my help, ask. Don't decide for me. And if I say no, respect it. I will, she promised. I hesitated, then added, and I need you to see me. Not just as the reliable one, not just as the helper, but as part of the family, as someone who matters. Her eyes welled up. You do matter, sweetheart. Then, show me, I said softly. She nodded. I will. And for the first time, I actually believed her. Things didn't magically fix overnight. Jenna was still bitter, Maddie was still salty, and Dad was still, well, Dad. But something had shifted with Mom. She started texting me just to check in, not to ask for favors, not to guilt me, just to talk. She invited me to lunch with no expectations attached. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, our relationship could be real again. I won't pretend everything is perfect. There's still tension, still unspoken resentment, and still a part of me that wonders if my family will ever fully change. But here's what I do know. I'm not the family doormat anymore. I'm not the default babysitter. And I sure as hell won't be taken for granted ever again. They can either accept that, or they can learn to live without me. Either way, I'll be just fine. A week passed. Then too, for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells around my family. I wasn't waiting for the next guilt trip, the next expectation, the next moment where I'd be asked to sacrifice my time for their convenience. And you know what? It felt amazing. But that didn't mean everything was perfect. Jenna, of course, wasn't taking this shift well. She was used to me falling in line, to me playing the role of the good brother who always said yes. And now that I had drawn boundaries, she didn't know what to do with herself. It all came to a head when she showed up at my apartment again, unannounced, of course. I opened the door to see her standing there, arms crossed, looking like she had been rehearsing an argument in her head. I sighed. Jenna, Ethan. I leaned against the door frame. Are you here to fight? Or are we actually going to have a conversation? She let out a sharp breath. I just need to say this, okay? I waved a hand. Go for it. She stepped inside and immediately launched into it. I don't like how things have been lately. It feels like you're pulling away from the family, and I hate it. I stayed silent, waiting for her to get to the point. She hesitated, then added, and I don't get why you're so mad. We've always done things this way. I let out a dry laugh. Exactly. She frowned. What? This is the problem, Jenna. You just said it yourself. This is how things have always been. You all assume I'll just go along with whatever is convenient for you. You plan trips without me, and then expect me to pick up the slack. You make decisions for me instead of asking me what I want. She looked away, crossing her arms. It wasn't malicious. I never said it was, I admitted. But that doesn't make it okay. Jenna stayed quiet for a moment, then muttered, I just don't want to lose you. That caught me off guard. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away again. You've always been the one person I could count on, Ethan. And I guess I just assumed you'd always be there no matter what. I exhaled. I'm still here, Jenna. I just won't be taken advantage of anymore. She swallowed. So what happens now? I shrugged. That's up to you. You can either respect my boundaries, or we keep having the same argument over and over. Jenna bit her lip, like she was struggling to accept that I wasn't budging this time. But after a long pause, she finally nodded. Okay. And just like that, the fight was over. If Jenna had been stubborn, Mom had been downright relentless, but in a good way. Instead of guilt-tripping me, she had actually started listening. She called me not to ask for favors but just to talk. She invited me to dinner without expecting anything in return. For the first time in a long time, it felt like she actually wanted a relationship with me. Not just the version of me that was useful to the family. And I won't lie, it felt good. But I also wasn't going to let my guard down completely. I had heard apologies before. I had been promised things would change. And yet, time and time again, things had gone back to the way they were. So this time, I was watching. I was letting her prove, through actions not words, that things would be different. And slowly, very slowly, I started to believe she meant it. Dad had been the quietest during this whole ordeal. While Jenna fought, Maddie fumed, and Mom tried to fix things. Dad had just stayed out of it. So when he called me out of the blue, I was genuinely surprised. "Hey, son," he said, his voice calm as always. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I said cautiously. He let out a slow breath. "Look, I'm not going to pretend to understand everything that's been going on, but I just want you to know, I get it." I raised an eyebrow. "You get it?" "Yeah," he admitted. "I've watched how your mom and Jenna rely on you. I've seen how much you do for the family, and I guess I never thought about how much we take that for granted." That was probably the most I'd ever heard my dad say on an emotional level. "So, what are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying you were right to stand up for yourself," he said simply. "And I hope you don't let anyone make you feel guilty for it." I swallowed, caught off guard. "Thanks, Dad," he nodded. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." I had to take a second to process that. My dad wasn't an emotional guy. He didn't do big speeches. So for him to say that, it meant something. Maddie, on the other hand, was still holding on to her grudge, like her life depended on it. She hadn't spoken to me since the trip. No texts, no calls, nothing. And you know what? That was fine. I had wasted too much time worrying about how to make everyone else happy. If Maddie wanted to stay mad, that was her choice. I wasn't going to chase after her. So where does that leave everything? Honestly, better than I expected. Jenna and I aren't best friends or anything, but she's trying. Mom is putting in real effort. Dad surprised me in a way I never saw coming. And as for Maddie, well, she'll either come around or she won't. But that's not my problem anymore. For the first time in my life, I feel free. Free from expectations. Free from guilt. Free from feeling like I have to earn my place in my own family. And let me tell you, it's a damn good feeling. I know some of you might be wondering if I regret anything. If I feel bad for how things played out. If I wish I had just sucked it up and gone along with what my family wanted. And the answer? Not for a second. Because at the end of the day, I finally did something for me. And I have zero plans to go back to the way things used to be. So, to anyone out there struggling with family expectations, guilt trips, or being treated like a convenience, let this be your sign. You don't owe anyone your time, your energy, your peace. And once you take that first step in standing up for yourself, you'll never look back. Story 2. Family sat me at the children's table at my sister's engagement party and claimed that I was their nanny. So I exposed everything and ruined the wedding. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Okay, folks, I'll do my best to keep this quick, but there are a lot of details to cover. For the past 2 hours or so, I, a 28-year-old woman, have been sitting here attempting to determine whether or not I am the real villain in this scenario. I'm pretty sure I'm not, but my family is blowing up my phone telling me I'm Satan incarnate. So here we go. To give you some context, I have vitiligo. If you don't know what it is, it's when portions of your skin lose color, so you have these random white spots. Mine is mostly on my face, including my forehead, cheeks, and the area around my eyes. I've had it since I was 12, and while I'm mostly cool with it now, it definitely made growing up in my appearance-obsessed family a living hell. When it comes to my family, they are essentially a living, talking advertisement. The golden kid has always been my 32-year-old sister Diane. She was the homecoming queen and a high school and college cheerleader. and she had that Instagram model appearance. The entire darn stuff. My 30-year-old brother Kevin is the kind of wealthy businessman who owns a car that is more expensive than my annual pay. I am the youngest person with the skin disease. My mom still can't speak vitiligo without looking like she swallowed a lemon. When I was younger, my parents spent thousands of dollars on therapies because they were ashamed to have a daughter who didn't match their ideal family aesthetic, not because they were worried about my health. Taking family pictures was a nightmare. In order to hide my spots, they would either force me to wear a lot of makeup or put me in the back. You know, real confidence-boosting stuff. In spite of all that enjoyable childhood trauma, I ended up being quite respectable. I have my own apartment in a good area of town, a solid job as a marketing manager at a computer business, and enough money saved up to make me comfortable. So comfortable, in fact, that when Diane got engaged 3 months ago to this rich fellow called Jake, I naively agreed to help her with part of the wedding expenditures. You see, Jake comes from a very wealthy family, the type of money that buys you holiday houses in 3 different countries. And Diane wanted to seem like she was on his level because she was Diane. The only issue, her boutique retail job doesn't exactly pay the big dollars. She approached me in tears and explained that she had to match Jake's wedding contributions, or his family would believe she wasn't good enough. And like a complete clown, I fell for it. I was funding her deposits for the venue, photographer, food, and some other items. For someone whose sister hardly remembers to tag me in family photos on Facebook, that's a significant sum of money. I disregarded the warning signs from the start because, well, family, right? In the 6 months that Jake and I have been dating, I have met him precisely twice, both times during family gatherings where Diane kept inadvertently putting me at the other end of the table. When I tried to join chats he was in, subtle as a stone to the face, she would suddenly demand my assistance with something in another room. I assumed she was simply being like her typical attention seeker. Diane has never seen me as a sister, but more as an accessory. When people would inquire about my vitiligo when we were children, she would respond that it wasn't communicable before I had a chance to speak. In order to dispel the notion that her flawless genes might potentially result in something similar to me, Mom informed her high school pals that I was adopted. I was relieved to be able to spend some time away from her at college. I was a little taken aback when Diane contacted me last week and insisted that I attend this elegant dinner with Jake's family, but I was hopeful that perhaps she would finally recognize all of the assistance I had been providing her with the wedding. Perhaps appropriately introduce me to the family of my future brother-in-law. I know I'm stupid. I genuinely put effort into getting ready for this meal. I applied makeup for around an hour without fully hiding my vitiligo. Years ago, I quit doing that. On a night out, however, my skin tone donned this lovely outfit that I had been putting off for a particular event. I even had my hair done. I was feeling fairly good about myself as I pulled up to this upscale restaurant downtown, where Jake's parents had made reservations for a private room. I could tell something wasn't right as soon as I went in. Diane hardly gave me a glance. My mother gave me the tight grin she wears when she's trying to be kind, but is irritated by something. And in order to avoid having to talk to me, my dad was acting like he was very interested in the menu. With a bewildered expression, Jake's mother, a tall, blonde woman awash in jewels, approached and introduced herself. "You are, too?" Before I could respond, she inquired, as if I were a stranger who had just walked in off the street. Like a vulture, Diane swooped in. "I'm Tara. She assists Kevin with his children. She functions as our family's nanny." For a moment, I really stopped breathing. Was it my sister who just told these guys that I was the nanny? While I'm standing there wearing a dress that costs $200? Obviously, that isn't nanny clothes. I started to reprimand her as I was paying for part of her wedding. However, my mother shot me that. "You dare not cause a commotion." She's become better over the years, you see. Jake remained silent despite his rather perplexed expression. His father simply nodded and went on. Evidently uninterested in the assistance, things worsened when it was time to sit down. Jake's little relatives, nieces, or whoever were seated at this little table that had been placed up in the corner. "Why don't you sit over there, Tara?" my mother replied, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You can assist in watching the kids." I glanced at the main table, which was adorned with candles and elegant wine glasses from China. The sister with the spotty face evidently had no place among my parents. Jake and his whole family, Kevin and his wife, Diane, and others. As if I were in a horrible sitcom from the 1990s, I was stranded at the children's table. While her brother flicked peas across the table, the young girl next to me continued begging to touch the white portions of my face. My sister, meantime, was laughing at everything Jake's father said at the adult table, like if he were Dave Chappelle or something. I promise. I made an effort to remain calm. I've been practicing keeping my thoughts about the way my family treats me hidden for the past 16 years. The waiter then arrives and inquires as to whether the nanny of the kids would like the adult dinner or the children's menu. I discovered then that Diane had not just informed Jake's parents that I was the babysitter. She had told everyone at the restaurant. I tried not to look at anyone as I muttered something about the adult lunch. I believe the young girl next to me was named Emma, Emily, or something. Why is the nanny dining with us? I kept asking. After we go to bed, nannies are expected to eat. Excellent parenting. Jake's relatives. Excellent quality item. Trying to determine whether to stick it out or bail, I was moving fish about my plate. I was summoned over by Jake's mother. How long have you been employed with Dion's family, Tara? There was enough silence at the main table for a few others to glance over, including Jake, who appeared genuinely interested in the response. My sister had apparently not thought to provide a detailed history for her babysitter. That was it. The last nail in the coffin, which already had to bear the burden of $15,000 in wedding deposits, and a lifetime of being viewed as the family's humiliation. I got up, went to the main table, and picked up my handbag. When Diane spotted me approaching, her face became completely white. My dad started clearing his throat, which is a worried thing he does before he's going to see a train accident. I made sure to speak loud enough for everyone to hear me say, "Actually, the nanny isn't me. I am the younger sister of Diane." Jake blinked, perplexed. His mother's lips opened a little. I've been immune to my mother's death look since I was around 16. The $5,000 down payment for your wedding location was made by me, your sister. The $3,200 for the food, the $2,800 for the photographer, the $1,500 for the flowers, and the $2,500 for... The DJ didn't deter me from staring at Diane. The table became quiet. In that room, you could have heard a mouse fart. To be honest, it would have been less unexpected to learn that his fiancée had a hidden sibling than to see Jake staring at Diane as if she had suddenly developed a second head. She was posing as domestic help. What is she discussing? Like Diane, he questioned her, his voice low and menacing. It sounded like a dying hyena. This phony chuckle. Stop making things awkward, Tara. Jokes are not appropriate at this time, I answered. Oh, I'm not kidding. Taking out my phone and launching the banking app. Do you want to watch the transfers? The total thus far is $15,320. Isn't it a lot of money for a nanny's pay? Jake's father cleared his throat, like an older, more somber Jake. I don't understand. You informed us that your parents were contributing to the wedding expenses. In an attempt to save what was left of this catastrophe, my mother dived in. Don't spoil this evening, Tara. At home, we can talk about this. Talk about what? I honestly didn't care anymore because I was in a good mood. How? Diane being ashamed of me is totally acceptable to you all. How she would rather act like I'm the one helping than acknowledge that she has a sister who has vitiligo. How I'm not good enough to sit at the same table, but I'm good enough to pay the bill. I turned to face Jake, who was utterly stunned. Were you aware that Diane had a sister? Or did she say that her family was just as ideal as she was? I could tell everything I needed to know from the expression on his face. He was completely unaware of my existence. She hadn't even revealed that she had another sister, and this guy was set to marry my sister. I realized then just how far Diane had gone to make me disappear from her life. Jake turned to Diane and whispered, "Wait, I was informed that you have only one sibling. It was just you and Kevin, you said." Diane was trying to cry, but she was unable to really shed any tears. Babe, it's complicated, but I was about to tell you. However, what? Jake pushed. You didn't want me to know that your sister suffers from vitiligo, though. Is that really the point of this? As usual, my dad got up and tried to take charge of the situation. Maybe we should have this conversation in private. Jake. Reynolds. Mr. and Miss S., I'm sorry if this was unclear. Jake's mother was staring at me as if I were a test subject. You aren't the nanny then? Actually, you're Diane. Sister. Whole sister. I verified that the same parents grew up in the same home. I simply have the familial flaw they'd rather not discuss. I made a facial gesture. Like I threw an F-bomb in church, my mom let out a gasp. Tara, we didn't teach you to talk like that, I laughed. For a classy restaurant, that was maybe a little too loud. No, you brought me up to blend in and act as though I don't exist when guests arrive. I'm done with it then. Additionally, I've paid for Diane's ideal wedding to a man who was unaware of my existence until 5 minutes ago. I turned to face Jake, who continued to gaze at Diane as if he had never seen her before. You seem like a good man. Asking your fiancée what else she has been lying about would be a good idea. Then I reached inside the back of the cat chair I was sitting in and took out my coat. I'm taking my money with me when I go. At last, Kevin made the decision to speak up. Tara, you're overreacting. Come on, simply take a seat. We may also discuss this. I didn't answer. I ignored my parents' calls and simply left. I felt a little sense of satisfaction as the door shut behind me, and I could really hear Diane beginning to weep. That sounds cruel. However, she deserved far more than a few tears at dinner for what she did. When I arrived at my car, my hands were trembling so much that I was unable to even get the key into the ignition, so I had to wait there for a minute. I don't believe I've ever been so furious in my life. Over the years, I've endured a lot of trash from my family. They had placed me in the rear of pictures and offered helpful cosmetic tips to disguise my vitiligo, the frequent analogies to Diane. However, here was a completely new level. She took my money and completely eliminated me from her life. Who does that? I had to take deep breaths for around 5 minutes before I felt confident enough to drive without hitting anything. My phone was already exploding by that point. My mother sent the first SMS. How could you cause your sister such embarrassment? Now you have to go back inside and say you're sorry. Next, Kevin. What the hell, Tara? You're behaving strangely. Before you worsen the situation, get back in here. My father. This conduct is not acceptable. This is not how we brought you up. 6 or so further texts were sent, all of which essentially said the same thing. The issue was me. Neither Diane's deception nor my parents' complicity. None of them believed her actions were improper. Not one. As I scanned through the texts, my anger increased. Then it dawned on me. Here, I still had all the cards, or rather, all the money. If they intended to treat me as though I were non-existent. All right, I wouldn't have any money either. I asked to postpone my sister Diane's June 12th wedding by calling the wedding location. I called the caterer, photographer, florist, and DJ in a same manner. They were all quite kind about it, most likely because they frequently deal with wedding-related turmoil. Family weddings are the worst, according to one of them. I hope it goes well. I sat in my car outside the restaurant, where Diane was still undoubtedly pretending to cry in front of Jake's family, and by the time I was finished, I had essentially wiped her whole wedding. Just to see the expression on her face, the petty part of me wanted to go back in. When she began receiving calls from the venue on the cancellations, I'm not a big asshole though. Rather, I texted the family group chat once. I have canceled every wedding reservation that I had paid for. Avoid asking your nanny to pay for your fictitious ideal life. I then blocked every one of their numbers. Each and every one. I was in this strange frame of mind when I drove home. I am half satisfied with myself. I'm half afraid of what I just did. That night, I slept like a piece of trash, believing I heard my phone when I woke up every couple of hours. Despite the fact that I disabled all alerts, I had persuaded myself that perhaps I had overreacted by morning. Perhaps I ought to have just taken Diana aside and had a quiet conversation with her, rather than exploding in front of Jake's family. I then looked at my email. I noticed a message from Diane with the subject line, "How could you," in all caps, as I was unable to check texts with everyone banned. Very mature. It was a lengthy, meandering email about how she had to spend the entire night repairing the damage after I had embarrassed her in front of Jake's family. How I was entirely to blame for Jake's recent questioning. What truly struck me was the final phrase. If you were so self-conscious about your appearance, you might have simply applied more makeup. And there it was. The actual problem in plain sight. It had nothing to do with my overreaction, drama, or jealousy. The subject was my vitiligo. It has been all along. I embarrassed Diane close to my face. I felt embarrassed enough to act as though I had no relation to her. I didn't reply. Therefore, I erased the email. Nothing else could be said. For the next 2 days, I called in sick to work. I simply couldn't bear the idea of entering and acting like nothing was wrong. My entire family had just expressed their feelings to me. In addition, I was quite certain that if I didn't return Diane's calls, she would come to my office. Furthermore, I really didn't need that turmoil at work. My doorbell rang at midday on the second day of my self-imposed isolation. I didn't bother to verify the folks before answering the door, since I assumed it was probably a parcel delivery. A huge error. Was Jake Diane's fiancé, or perhaps his ex-fiancé, standing there looking as like he hadn't slept in days? At that time, I had no idea how things stood. I stepped back because of the serious, almost hostile expression on his face. Is it accurate? Without even greeting him, he made a demand about the money. Regarding being her sister, I immediately felt worn out from everything and slumped against the doorframe. Indeed, every single syllable. You're actually her sister then? She didn't grow up with some distant relative or family acquaintance. Whole sister, same parents. Lived in the same home growing up. For what seemed like the millionth time, I affirmed. Diane is someone I've known all her life. I was foolish enough to assist her in the first place because of this. He seemed totally bewildered as he combed through his hair. Before Kevin arrived when she was 2 years old, she told me she was an only kid. Did she never bring you up? Not every 6 months. It stung more than I thought it would. I was aware that I made Diane feel ashamed, but I wanted to entirely remove myself from her memory. You now understand why. I pointed to my face as I said, I'm not exactly the ideal person. Her goal is to sell you. I prepared myself for a remark on my skin as he gazed at me for a considerable amount of time. Rather, my aunt has vitiligo, he remarked. My younger cousin Mia also does. Was Diane really expecting me to be interested in that? I simply shrugged, but I was screaming within. All of this suffering, all of this drama, nor would Jake have given a damn about my situation. Would you like to enter? Suddenly remembering that we were having this entire talk at my doorway, I volunteered. If you need it, I can get you coffee or anything stronger. Whatever remained of Diane's meticulously constructed phony existence would be destroyed by the talk I was about to have with Jake. To be honest, I was impatient. The disarray made me feel strangely self-conscious, so I invited Jake inside my flat. Over the preceding few days, I hadn't been particularly motivated to clean. I was too depressed to go to my bedroom, so I'd been sleeping on the couch, where there was a blanket nest and takeaway containers on the coffee table. I hastily grabbed several empty glasses and murmured, Sorry about the disaster zone. Not exactly anticipating any company. This is nothing, I assure you. Glancing around, Jake remarked, Now is the time for you to visit my location. We sat down at my small kitchen table after I had made us each coffee. For 1 minute, there was an extremely awkward quiet, as if neither of us knew how to begin this messed up talk. So I said, At last. Diane probably has a different account of what transpired at supper. Jake gave a little laugh that sounded anything but joyful. You might say that, indeed. She claims that you've always envied her bond with the family, and that you cooked up the whole wedding payment scandal to make her seem bad in front of my parents. My coffee almost suffocated me. Whoa, it's imaginative. According to her, your skin condition has caused mental health problems for years, and in order to maintain harmony, the family often just tolerates your outbursts. Mental health conditions. Episodes. Are you seriously joking with me? I had to set down my mug to avoid spilling coffee all over the place since my hand was trembling so much. I oversee marketing at FinTech Solutions. I have a 5-year plan and a 401k. I've never experienced an episode in my life. Jake was looking at my face, but not in the awkward way most people do when they look at my vitiligo. He seemed to be trying to figure things out as he looked at me. I didn't trust her, he said. The entire narrative had a strange vibe. I came to hear your viewpoint for that reason. I took out my phone and launched this banking app. Check it out for yourself. I gave him the phone and listed all of the wedding-related payments I'd made. Verify the quantities and the dates. If you'd want, I can also show you my receipts. With each swipe, he became more serious as he scrolled across his face. $15,000. Tara, Jesus. Yes, 15 grand. In order for my sister to pose as wealthy as you. I returned my phone. What's the best part? She has never once shown gratitude to me. Not one. Hello. I appreciate you sending me hundreds of dollars in my wedding SMS. Nothing. For a minute, Jake remained silent and simply gazed at his coffee. At last he stated, It's not just the money thing. The lying is the problem. She told me that only her parents made up her family. Kevin with his spouse. She showed me pictures of her family, presumably ones you were cut out of or weren't in. It sounds about right, I said. She informed me that she attended UCLA and earned a business degree with honors. She claimed to be a six-figure marketing director at a boutique agency. He gave me a glance. Does any of that hold water? I had a strange mixture of joy and sorrow. After a year and a half, she left community college early. She has a part-time job at a mall apparel store. Her sole marketing activity consists of sharing their content on Instagram. Jake buried his face in his palms. What else? What further lies has she been telling? I didn't want to ruin my sister's relationship, so I told him no. This poor guy deserved to know what he was going into, so maybe a little bit because of that. In order to maintain the illusion, I told him that Diane had always been the golden child, that my parents had allowed her to lie and manipulate from the beginning, and that she had been living much beyond her means ever since she met him. You two met through shared industry contacts, she informed my parents. Is that true? I asked. Jake gave a head shake. A dating app brought us together. She claimed to be sick of dating men who lacked ambition for her. That iconic dean made me chuckle uncontrollably. Everyone else is ambitious enough, but she has never had a job for longer than 8 months. We spoke for more than an hour. Considering the situation, it seemed strange how simple it was to speak with Jake. He appeared to be a sincere, kind man, funny and intelligent, genuinely paid attention to what I was saying. The rich douche is the exact opposite. I had imagined Diane coming down. After giving a nod, Jake turned to face his now empty coffee mug. Diane and I must end our relationship. Silently, he said. Someone who has lied about almost everything, even her own sister, is not someone I can marry. I experienced a strange sense of remorse. I didn't say all of this to separate you two, you see. Indeed you did. He was on the verge of smiling when he intervened. I'm happy you did too. Now is a better time to find out than after we are married. He got to his feet. I appreciate your candor with me. I apologize for everything. Your family should have treated you better. I experienced a strange range of feelings when he went. Mostly, though, I was just exhausted. I'm so over the lies, the family turmoil, and the incessant reminders that I'm not good enough. I didn't care what people thought, though, for the first time in my life. I had tried to fit in with a family that would never embrace me. For 28 years. Perhaps it was time to give up. My phone beeped with an email notice, just as I was ready to go to bed. It came from Jake. I wanted to inform you that I spoke with Diane. It's finished. She's telling everyone that you're to blame. However, that isn't the complete story. Someone who treats their own sister that way and lies so readily is not someone I could stay with. Tara, look for yourself. I spent a lot of time looking at the message. I'm not sure how to feel. I'd achieved my goal. Diane had at last been held accountable for her deeds, which is why I didn't feel better. My mom sent me another email notice with the subject line, which was the response. This time, you've gone too far. I choose not to read it. Simply removed it without replying. There was no purpose. Diane's perfection was something they would never acknowledge. They would never admit how deeply they had wounded me. Officially, I had finished them all. The following morning, I heard someone beating on my door. Still half asleep, I staggered out of bed, wondering whether the place was on fire or something. My mother was standing there looking like she was about to kill someone when I looked at the folks. Of course, that someone is myself. She had undoubtedly seen the lights turn on when I woke up, but I considered acting as though I wasn't home. I inhaled deeply before opening the door. However, the chain was still on and there was only a crack. I'm not a moron. What are you looking for? I inquired. We must speak, I said. She said, come on in. No, I said. Through the door, say whatever you need to say. She had a startled expression. It's the first time I've ever fully confronted her in that way. Tara, don't be so dumb. This talk will not take place in the hallway. Then, I suppose, we won't have it at all. She put her foot in the opening as I was about to shut the door. Your sister is inconsolable. She gave a hiss. Jake ended the engagement as a result of your deception. How could you harm your own family in this way? I laughed, which probably sounded a little crazy. My falsehoods. Are you serious now? Diane introduced me as the babysitter. She took hundreds of dollars of my money and wiped me out of her life. The daring thing my mother did was roll her eyes. She went into a panic. She was unsure of how to inform Jake's family of your situation. She felt ashamed. It was an error. An error. I was virtually yelling. It's okay to inform folks that your sister is helping out and to make her sit at the kids' table as she pays for your wedding. It's intentional brutality. My mother simply shook her head as if I were exaggerating. Your skin has always been quite sensitive. Diane was only attempting to steer clear of an uncomfortable discussion. I went utterly crazy at that point. Leave, silently, I said. Please pardon me. Now get out of my hallway. I was trembling as I spoke. I will no longer be the family secret. I'm tired of being treated as like, I should be appreciative that you even recognize me. I've had enough of you all. She seems truly taken aback. She probably didn't anticipate I would fight back. Tara, you can't just shut us off. Your family is us. Observe me. I slammed the door in her face after saying that. For 5 more minutes, she continued to knock, alternating between strange efforts to guilt-trip me and irate demands. I turned up my music and put on my headphones till she gave up and walked away. For a time, at least, I believed that would be the end of it. I was mistaken, boy. Kevin appeared at my favorite coffee shop, which I visit every Saturday morning with his wife and children, throughout the course of the following several days, obviously trying to bump into me, by chance. I continued going after catching a glimpse of them via the glass. Diane, however, went above and beyond. On social media, she began sharing these cryptic, passive-aggressive remarks, such as when someone stabs you and then accuses you of causing the bleeding. Although she didn't tag me, all of her friends began praising her and saying that she deserved more. Additionally, some people are simply poisonous. The worst was when she arrived at my apartment complex and pretended to be giving me medicine that I was in dire need of. I'm glad my neighbor phoned before letting her in, but I was starting to feel stressed. I began taking other routes to work, always keeping my blinds closed and looking in my rearview mirror for recognized vehicles. You would understand if you had my family, even though it seems crazy. A week into the mayhem, Jake returned without warning and appeared enraged. He paced my living room and said, I think Diane actually believes this wedding is still happening. He clarified that he had received a call from an upscale location verifying his final wedding guest list. Diane had made reservations, but he hadn't. It turns out that, under the assumption that Jake wouldn't cancel, she had made a reservation at a brand new location and paid the deposit in his name. When the impending payments were brought up by the planner, almost $20,000 for a designer dress fitting, food, and decor, she has gone behind his back. Jake knew. She must have assumed that I would simply comply, he continued, shaking his head. For example, I would not be aware of an entire wedding being organized without my permission. He canceled everything right away by calling the venue, but he wasn't finished yet. She signed the contracts under my name. I would be held accountable if payments were made lawfully. That is deception. Tara, knowing that she would blame me, I hesitated, but he cut me off. What she thinks doesn't matter to me. For the first time in her life, she must deal with the repercussions. I sat on my couch for a while after he departed, reflecting on how rapidly things had gotten out of hand, all due to my refusal to participate in being the family's humiliation once more. The subject line of the email I saw when I opened my inbox was from Diane's friend Melissa. I thought you ought to view this. It contained a screenshot of one of Diane's private Instagram stories. I looked horrible in this photo from years ago, before I had accepted my vitiligo and was still frantically attempting to hide it with cosmetics. The caption said, "Your sister destroys your life because she's envious of your happiness when you're mentally unstable. Some people are poisonous from birth." She tagged many accounts that advocate for mental health, portraying herself as the unfortunate family member coping with my problems. People were expressing their support and complimenting her on her tremendous character for enduring me for so long in the comments section. I was feeling nauseous. Dion wasn't only being bitter or petty. This was a deliberate attempt to ruin my reputation and paint me as the antagonist in her tale. What's the worst? She was being believed. Reaching for my phone, I dialed the number of the one person I believed could help me cope with this nightmare, Jake. Regarding Diane's social media slander campaign, I gave Jake a call. She said that I had a mental illness and was fixated on destroying her ideal existence. She's establishing a story, Jake remarked. It It will be simpler to say, I'm filing fraud charges because you manipulated me, if she can persuade everyone that you're unstable. What ought I to do? I inquired. People are beginning to trust her. Keep a record of everything. This afternoon, I'm meeting with my lawyer to discuss the credit card theft. You ought to attend. This is beginning to resemble slander. On the same day, HR summoned me to a pressing meeting. It turned out that my parents had called my employer to say I was mentally incapable of doing my duties. In addition to a formal letter voicing serious worries about my mental health, they had included screenshots of Diane's posts. Fortunately, I had a solid record with the business. I informed them that I was meeting with a lawyer that afternoon and presented them with the proof of Diane's deception. Although they were sympathetic, they cautioned me to keep them informed if the circumstance had an impact on my job. When I met Jake in the lawyer's office, I was trembling with anger. My parents made an attempt to get me dismissed. After reviewing my proof, Jake's attorney sent cease and desist letters to my parents and dying people. Jake proceeded with the claims of credit card fraud. I was processing everything that night. Jake's cousin Lisa texted me to say she supported me. My phone rang before I could respond. Kevin. He alerted me to Diane's increasingly aggressive conduct and the extent my parents would go to undermine me. I changed my hair right away and remained at Jake's house while the court case was being handled. The letters to cease and desist were successful. After Diane removed her postings, my parents hurried to repair the damage. However, Jake's fraud case proceeded once it was established that more than $20 had been charged without authorization. My mom emailed 10 days later, requesting that we settle the matter as a family without the involvement of attorneys or law enforcement. I met my folks at a public coffee shop with Jake. I invited him to be my witness. We wanted to discuss how to move ahead. According to my father, this family will be torn apart by these legal measures. Already, the family was in ruins. You choose Diane over me, I shot back. You've always done so. As soon as I was diagnosed, you made me feel embarrassed about my important video. Now the main difference is that I'm at last advocating for myself. All we wanted to do was keep you safe. Weakly, my dad remarked. We did not want you to be judged by others. You were the only one who ever treated me differently. I fired back. I am not less than anyone because of my vitiligo. My skin was never the issue. You were ashamed of it. After everything they had done, my mom's apology was insufficient, even though they eventually acknowledged their sins. What are you looking for from us? My father requested that you all issue a public apology, recognizing the falsehoods, a letter of retraction to my business. And in order to understand why you all felt that abusing me in this way was acceptable, I want you all to seek treatment. A public apology was met with resistance from my parents, who asked if I would drop the lawsuits if they agreed. I informed them that their future actions will determine the outcome of the slander lawsuit. However, Jake, not me, made the choice to commit credit card theft. I'm not going to drop the charges. Jake attested to Diane's criminal activity. My folks looked deflated. They had anticipated apologizing and everything returning to normal. My dad replied, "We'll give it some thought. But please think again, Tara. Your family still includes us." "No," I just answered. My parents really submitted a retraction to my firm and released a public apology 2 weeks later. On the fraud allegations, Diane accepted a plea agreement that included required therapy, restitution, and probation. She posted a statement acknowledging that she had distorted some facts about me, but she never offered a genuine apology. I'm gradually reestablishing some sort of relationship with Kevin. He's trying to figure out how his quiet allowed Diane and my parents to act in that way. And what do you know? I began dating Jake. What started off as him being my ally turned into more. I've become pals with his cousin Lisa as well. Having someone who knows what it's like to have vitiligo is good. I still get irritated about stuff sometimes. Despite the hardships my family has caused me, I am mostly thankful that I have at last discovered the strength to advocate for myself. Sometimes you have to reach your lowest point before you realize you deserve more. Edit. I appreciate all of your help. A few updates. Things are going really well since Jake and I moved in together. 2 of my parents joined a support group for relatives of persons who are trying and have noticeable differences. 3rd, Diane is now low-key after completing probation. 4, the turmoil has now subsided, but I maintain strict limits with each of them. Standing up for yourself can make all the difference in the world.